Hello, everyone, and it is time to do some pickups explanation thing, showing off whatever you want to call it thing for the month of April, because it's May 3rd. And I actually got all set to go and do this video when I came back from going out this morning. And I ended up with this big stack of things that you see in front of you, so I have even more things than I thought I was gonna have, which is crazy. So I just want to get these out of the way. This is stuff I picked up today. This is 22 issues of GamePro, and it's not Nintendo Power. At this point, some people know that I love Nintendo Power especially, but I got these all really, really cheap for like less than $1 each, and they're all from the exact period that I like to go with, which is between the N64 era, and for these GamePros, they go from early 1997 to the latest one is January 2001, so like right at the end of the N64. So it has stuff from the N64, and you get a Nintendo perspective from things and everything like that. But you also, I can get the benefits of other stuff from that period as well, which is kind of cool. And also, this is from a time when GamePro was doing, they were doing, tactics and stuff like that, the same way that Nintendo Power did, so it'll be cool, just a little bit, extra stuff to get from the GamePro stuff. And still, I'm not getting onto games yet, because I have other stuff to do. I also got, you might have seen this for movies, for beer, places to see, just all kinds of things. But this is a book compiled by somebody who knows what they're doing, and with contributions from other people who know what they're talking about, critics and stuff like that. And it's 1001 video games you must play before you die. And when you write stuff like this, it automatically dates itself. So this was written in 2011, 2012. That was when this was published. But I'm actually more interested to see what people would have done for 5 years ago than what they would do for right now. Because I can tell you what stuff was, the stuff that people would want to play in the past 5 years. I would like to see, the idea that people had at least 5 years ago, to look at games from that way. And the reason that I like this book is because it's not just the best games. I keep putting shit away when I'm still kind of talking about it. The reason that I like this book, and the reason that I'm going to actually try and follow this book for the most part, if it's just a game that I'm vaguely interested in, that I'm going to play it, because it's not the best games. That's not the point of this. The point of this is something that I really feel strongly about, which is games that do something differently, or do something so well at least one point that, they demand to be played. Looking at games from an artistic standpoint, looking at games from a historical standpoint, so on and so forth. Stuff that's really important to me. And actually a couple things that are in my huge pickup pile from this month are directly related to the fact that I got this book and hadn't really cared about something before, but now I kind of do. Someone already made it's not really a quiz, but it's sort of like a checklist, and see how many you did and compare it to other people thing online. And I found out that I had played at least 350 of the games in this book, which is a good head start. There's a lot of games in here, like PC games, older PC games and stuff, that at some point I might play, but in the near future I don't see myself playing them at all. But it's still a really interesting read to see how critics and people that were given the chance to talk about certain games in this book talk about it. So you'll see this influencing stuff that I get at some point, or stuff that I play. Because, it's not just me trying to get something. It's now a feeling that it's an important game to play. And last things before I get to actual games, I have to give a shout out on these 4 guides. This was from my friend Dan, he was bringing stuff into the store. He just wanted to get rid of some guides, and he said, Derek, the first things, any of the N64 guides you want, you can just take them for stuff you don't have. So it was like yay big pile, and there was a couple I already had, and there was other stuff that wasn't N64, but I took these four, and it was thank you, Dan. That was all he wanted in return, was to get a little bit of a shout out. And while we're on the subject of guides, I also got a couple guides here that I got this month. This Mortal Kombat 4 one, this Majora's Mask Perfect guide, and I'm going to put that there to make another note. Tony Hawk, Buck Bumble, Quake, NBA Live 2000, even, just for whatever. And ODT, I kind of, it's not an N64 guide, and that's what I specifically collect, but I have ODT for PS1, and I have the EverDrive, and I can play the N64 ROM of ODT, which was basically finished, and I can use this too, so it's sort of an N64 guide, but not really. But the last thing I want to talk about is I now have 3 guides from this company, which is Versus Books. And it's very, very important for me because I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point, but Versus Books was a fantastic company. They make the most in-depth, the most, graphically superior, honestly, for the design of it. And just basically the most effort that you see in any guides from this period. Versus Books, called their Perfect Guides. Those are the guys making the best guides. Unfortunately, they were never as big as Prima, and they didn't survive like Prima and Brady Games did after the fact, which is the most disappointing thing in the world to me, that we had these people making guides along with a bunch of other people, but the ones that survived were not them. It was Prima, who made, just quantity over quality was their whole thing. So it's just a quick thing. Always be on the lookout for your Perfect guides, because they're fantastic. And now we can finally get on to games. We're almost 8 minutes into this video, and this is the first time we're going to talk about games. And I've got them separated into 3 piles of sort of companies, so I'm going to take the top half of this Nintendo one here, and we'll get the big one out of the way. Mario Kart, haven't stopped playing it. I got it last Friday, so I've had it about 5 days. Excuse me, God. It was already the best Mario Kart, and it's even better. The battle mode's fantastic. Don't even hesitate to pick this up if you have a Wii U. Don't hesitate to pick it up if you have a Wii U, but don't hesitate to pick it up if you have a Switch. It is the second must-play game for the system, right there. Do Nintendo first. A couple games I picked up the other day. This is Thunder and Lightning, which I was under the impression was related to, in some way, a much more expensive game called Fire and Ice. But apparently that's not true. I looked it up afterwards. It's not true at all. It's just a little interesting shoot-'em-up puzzler sort of kind of game. I haven't really played it yet, but it's interesting to me. And then Demon Sword, which is a original Nintendo, half port. I give companies credit when they knew that they couldn't just straight port their games to the NES because it was going to be way too different and just not nearly powerful enough than the arcade machine. So Taito did a fairly decent job porting Demon Sword over to the NES. And 2 Super Nintendo games. This is the Skins game from IREM, the IREM Skins game. Even if you really look closely at the title, the full title is the IREM Skins game. And other than the PGA games from EA, there's not a whole lot of great golf games on the Super Nintendo. But this is a pretty decent one from what I've heard. So I figured that's a good one to grab. And the other one, which the label is a little bit ripped, but you can still see the focal point, which is these 2 youngins who don't look like they know what they're doing. And this is Rival Turf, and it's part of a beat-em-up series from Jalico that has 2 much more expensive games in it. One of them is the Peacekeepers, and the other one is the Brawl Brothers. I don't remember which one of those is second or third, but this one I'm pretty sure is first, and it's a lot cheaper than those other 2. None of them are spectacular, so try Rival Turf. Grab a Super Famicom copy of any of them if you can, just to try them out. But don't go crazy over them. And then 2 DS games I got here. This is Scribblenauts. This is the first Scribblenauts. I had Super Scribblenauts already. Haven't played any of them yet. But my boss friend Matt swears by him, so down for some Scribblenauts. And then Squishy Tank. Just an adorable looking game, and I found out after I bought it, because I had to buy it when you look at it, but I found out it's more like a Match-3 puzzle game with the squishy tanks being sort of involved on the top screen. So I really have no idea what it is other than that, because I would have figured it was like a action game with a little adorable tank. Next, because I so am committed to telling myself that I'm done buying Wii U games, right? I'm really not. I love the Wii U, and now's the time to buy these games. So let's just get through these 6 games that I picked up this month for it, and I thought I was done buying them. This is just something I picked up for $5. Haven't opened it or anything like that, but $5 for this, which I might use at some point. I'm a fat tub of shit, so and it's not tough to find balance boards either, so at some point when I have more space, I might actually use this. So that's cool. Wii Fit U. This game, I know this game is shit. Don't worry about it. I already know that, but it's a first-person shooter. It's got James Bond, which in video games is more interesting to me than in movies. And I'm just interested to see if it's as bad as people said it was when it came out, and just have another Wii U game. Because I would never buy it for another system. I would only buy it for the Wii U. Hyrule Warriors. I had Hyrule Warriors Legends for 3DS that I bought when the 3DS copy got a little bit cheaper. I never opened it. And I said, okay, well, I don't have to buy Hyrule Warriors, because I was under the impression that Hyrule Warriors was going to stay expensive for a long time. And it didn't. It actually has dropped in price a bit, to the point where it's probably the most affordable it'll ever be right now. So I picked up my Hyrule Warriors. I got rid of the other one to get my money, just a little bit of my money back that I spent on it. So I got Hyrule Warriors on the Wii U, because when it comes down to it, I'd rather have a Wii U game than a 3DS game. That's all. I still probably won't play that for a while. And then I bought Scribblenauts, the original for DS. I had Scribblenauts, Super Scribblenauts, and now I have Scribblenauts Unlimited for the Wii U, because it's a Wii U game. And there we go. I think there's another one, Scribblenauts Unmasked, a superhero game. If I see that, I'll probably pick it up too. Another game that I saw for a long time, and if I'm buying Mass Effect 3 on the Wii U, which I figured I probably would at some point, I will probably buy Assassin's Creed 3 and 4, even though I don't really care for those series either. But I will probably give it a shot if it's on the Wii U. Same with this, Mass Effect 3. Finally broke down and got it. And this, everyone knows that this game just got released on the Switch at full price. And as much as I wanted games to play on the Switch, I'm not spending $60 on this game that I can get for like $13 on Amazon for the Wii U, because it was Nintendo Select. And I probably won't play it for a little while at this point because it's on the Wii U, but I have still been playing my Wii U up until Mario Kart came out. So, still supposed to be a really good game, so check it out, and grab it on the Wii U if you don't feel like paying the full price for the Switch port, because it's supposed to be really good. Which I've been hearing from people who played it on the Switch, but it got Nintendo Selects too. Wii Games, we have Mercury Meltdown Revolution for a couple bucks. I have both of them on the PSP, and just a weird thing, like, I usually will say, like, nah, I don't really want it on the Wii, because I don't want to force myself into any motion situations or anything like that. But not only do you not need it for this, but I would actually not mind it that much on the Wii compared to the PSP, I imagine. If you don't know what it is, it's sort of like a Marble Madness, but with like a big blob of molten mercury. It's kind of cool. There's 2 games for the PSP which are dirt cheap, and then this game you can probably find for pretty cheap too. And another game, really cool game, Rhythm Heaven Fever. I have the first Rhythm Heaven. for DS, which I haven't played yet, but it's basically WarioWare if all the games were based around keeping a beat, basically. So, as much as I don't know what else they can really do with this series, because it's always based around keeping a rhythm, I'm totally glad to have both games, because just, as they're as crazy as WarioWare, is what it is. For one more Wii game, Endless Ocean Blue World. This is the sequel with more fish and more things to do in it. Not that I've played the first one yet, but this is from Nintendo, first party game, and just the concept of it to me seems really cool. It always has. Just exploring, finding fish, exploring undersea life and stuff like that, which is what I thought I was getting with Abzu when I bought it a couple months ago. And I didn't, but I still got a good game out of it. And I expected it to be more like this. So at some point I'm going to play Endless Ocean, and it's going to be what I originally imagined Abzu was going to be. Because this existed before, and that's what I had to base it on. So Endless Ocean Blue World, and then this is the only GameCube game I picked up, and I actually had this on PS2 just as a loose disc. And I found it for GameCube, and I was like, you know what? People really like this game, and if it's on GameCube, I'm more likely to play it than a loose PS2 disc. So, you know what? I'm going to grab it and keep it, and maybe I'll play it. So, on to the next one. Let me do this one first. So, in a weird month, I only have 2 PS2 games, which is just weird because it's the one that you usually expect to have the most games for, because there's so many. You just pick them up. This is Backyard Basketball 2007, which I've made some sort of post about it before, either on Tumblr way back or whenever, that, like, as much as you love the backyard sports games as much as I do, the PS2 ones are never that great because you expect to be like the PC ones, and they can't really do that. But you know what? I never really see this one, Backyard Basketball 2007. You see the first one all the time, but hey, it's going to have Shaq in it, almost certainly. Yeah, it has Shaq. So, yeah, why the hell not? And then, this game is actually in that 1001 Games book. And it's the PsyOps, the Mindgate Conspiracy, which is a absolute cult classic from what I've heard. I always think of it in the same realm as Second Sight, because they're both about, like, psychic powers and stuff like that. They're not made by the same company or anything like that, but I always hear about this game. And the fact that it was in that 1001 Games book cemented it. I was like, okay, I have to pick up a copy of that at some point, even if I never play it. Oh, hey, you should have done PS1 first. But there's also only 2 PS1 games. This Ray Tracers, it's actually worth a lot more when it's complete and everything, but there's no back on this, so I got it pretty cheap. And I didn't really expect much, but I saw it, and I was like, it basically plays like Chase HQ, which makes sense because it's actually developed by Taito, who made Chase HQ. And at that point, when you play it, I mean, there's not a whole lot in this game, but it plays like a really, really early version of playing like Burnout 3 Takedown. So I was sold on it right away, so there's that. And then a game that you probably never knew existed, Ball Blazers Champions on the PS1. If anyone's never heard of Ball Blazer, it's a older, I think it's on PC stuff too, like computers, but for the Atari 7800, this was a big game, and it looks pretty good when you look at the 7800 version. People go crazy over it. It makes sense. And it's another one of those futuristic combat sports games, and it's really not that great, most likely, but I thought it was weird, and I found it complete, so I was like, you know what, I have to get this. More PlayStation stuff. So even though I had 1 and 2 backwards just now, I'm going to keep going and do PS3. And this is where you start to notice that a lot of the stuff I got this month is based on that 1001 Games list. Fear 1 is in that book. I've played Fear 1, but I never played 2 or 3, and I picked up Fear 2. Again, I think Mass Effect 1 and 2 are in the book. And the thing is that I got Mass Effect 3 on Wii U. So, and I have Mass Effect 1 on Xbox 360, so now I have 1 on 360, 3 on Wii U, and I had to pick up 2 because it was really cheap. 2 for PS3, and I have not played any of them yet. Again, Dead Space. I'm pretty sure Dead Space is in there. I played the first one, and I picked up 2 for the PS3, and we'll get to the third one later as well. Because one was cheaper on, this was cheaper on PS3, and then 3 was cheaper on 360. I don't know why that happens, necessarily. MotorStorm. MotorStorm is another one that's in that book, and I don't know what it is when that guy was picking games, if he picked them, or if somebody else had their input. There's a lot of these sort of like off-road racing games, and I admit that they all do different things, but MotorStorm was one of them. Other games I didn't get, Fuel and Pure are both in there, which is weird. And the last PS3 game I got is Watchmen, The End is Nigh. This is the only time that the Watchmen beat-em-up game was printed on a disc, and it comes in this. It usually has an outer sleeve too, but it's more expensive to find a complete. I spent like $10 on this online. I was like, you know what, if it's missing the sleeve and it's like $10, I'll go for it. But it has the Watchmen End is Nigh game, which is like a mediocre beat 'em up, but it's Watchmen, so I kind of had to have it. And it has the movie on Blu-ray, which I already have. So, not that I really needed it, I got the movie again. And I just kind of had to get this game because I really, really love Watchmen, even though I don't really do anything else for comics or superheroes or anything like that. But the fact is that you get to play this game as one of my favorite characters in the world, Night Owl. Because, fuck Rorschach. If you like Rorschach, you're a dangerous person. Alan Moore has said that. Once the subscribers drop even further. But, yeah. Night Owl. His name's Night Owl, right? I fucking hope I didn't fuck up his name. Dan. I'm like so nervous about it now that I just went and said his name and I was like, he has a really generic name. A couple of PS4 games too. Pinball Arcade Season 2. I absolutely love the Pinball Arcade. And you'll notice that this has a PEGI rating because Season 2 was not printed on any disc in the United States. They're up to like Season 5 now of putting out new tables for DLC, but Season 2 got printed elsewhere outside of the United States, and I wanted to get the physical copy. So I ordered this like a month and a half ago, and I just got it the other day. But I'm really happy to have it though. And this was at the thrift store of all places. This is the Game of Thrones Telltale game for PS4. And so now I have that, and I have Wolf Among Us. And I've never played a Telltale game. And they even just put Tales from Borderlands on PS Plus this month. And so I downloaded that. So I have 3 Telltale games, never played any of them. But this might get me into Game of Thrones for all I know. I never watched Game of Thrones. And this is something that was on clearance at Target. Really, really cheap, Geometry Wars. I think the full title is Geometry Wars 3 Dimensions Evolved. But Geometry Wars, if you never played, is really cool. It never feels, it's never felt like a full game, which is kind of a problem to me, and I find it problematic that they keep printing and insist on printing more games like it, when there are other games that are the same price range and the same level of, less prestige, but more actual games. But, Geometry Wars is cool, and I'll pick it up for dirt cheap because that's, nobody wants to buy this, necessarily. And then a game I felt actually bad for because this came out the same day that Mario Kart 8 came out, and I had it pre-ordered for even longer before it. The only reason I had this pre-order was because it's not full price for this collector's edition of a really cool looking game. This is Little Nightmares 6 edition for PS4. And I reluctantly opened it earlier today so that I could see what was inside of it. It's really cool. So it has this little figure, it has the game in a full retail copy, and it has a poster, stickers, and the soundtrack CD. Because I can tell this game's going to have a soundtrack that you don't listen to all the time. It's not going to be creepy as shit or anything like that. And then we're on the last pile because holy shit. The weirdest thing about this month was that early on, I actually felt like I wasn't going to have that many games to go over because it's going to be sort of like up and down all the time. But here we are, closing in on like 25 minutes of video. So, another shout out to give. This is the only thing I got for the Dreamcast this month, and it's not a real game. But you should all be following on Instagram, ToySaurus. is a guy who makes all kinds of Sega reproductions and Sega different things like that. And so he makes a lot of really, really interesting Genesis repros. I haven't picked up any of those yet, but I've now gotten this Neo Geo emulator disc, as well as a one for the Master System and for the TurboGrafx. And they're just really, really cool. And the thing about this that I really wanted it for is the fact that he doesn't go for the staples with this one. I don't know who made the thing, but he prints them on disc and makes them look nice and everything. But the type of games that are on here are not your typical things. There's only 4 fighting games. Fatal Fury, because it's the staple. The 2 King of Monsters games, because they're not quite fighting games. And World Heroes, because who the fuck knows? I don't know. But some of the really great games that are on here that you don't ever see anywhere else. There's Magical Drop. There's Panic Bomber and Neo Bomberman, which for obvious reasons aren't ever printed on any other collections or anything like that. There's some great shooters, like Aero Fighters 2, Ghost Pilots, and Viewpoint. And there's a couple of the beat 'em ups too. There's Sengoku 2, which you never see printed. You always see Sengoku 1. 8-Man, Robo Army, and some other stuff. Windjammers, great game, but Data East, so they don't usually print it anywhere else. Thrash Rally, Power Spikes 2, which is like the volleyball equivalent of Super Baseball, which is also on here. Super Baseball is on here. Great, great disc. He sells these for like $20. Absolutely worth it. And for Genesis Repros, this is not from him. This was something that at work we couldn't get to work on any Genesis. This is a repro of Fix-It Felix Jr., a homebrew based on the real game that they made for Wreck-It Ralph. We couldn't get it to work on any Genesis, but it works on a Retron 5, so I was giving it. And ToySaurus can make you one of these too that'll work on a real Genesis and everything. And it won't even be on a regular black cartridge, because he always does special cartridges for all his stuff. But Fix-It Felix Jr., if you've never seen the real game that they made into Fix-It Felix Jr., it's actually a very, very good and very creative old school style arcade game. It's got a lot of elements of Donkey Kong, obviously, from the characters that you can tell. It's also got like Hubert and stuff into it. It's really good. The only thing about it is the intro takes forever. No arcade would have an intro. No arcade game would have an intro that's as long as this game. It's like 3 minutes. But that's really cool. It's a Fix-It Felix Jr. repro. And 2 Genesis hockey games right here. I'm totally down to have any 16-bit hockey game, especially mostly any hockey game, period. But from a time where everything was getting really competitive, even every EA game, I'll buy, pick up any EA game because they're all pretty cheap except for NHL 98, which I still want because it's going to be, it's interesting to see what point they were at with that. So this is 93. This is the year before 94. Obviously, that's stupid to say, but this is the last year that they didn't have both licenses. The first game that they made had just the NHL license. The second game they made in 93 had just the NHLPA license. And then in 94, the reason everyone goes crazy over 94, it was the first year that they had both, and they also made a really great game. And then this game is another one. I actually don't particularly like this game. You'll find that any of the ESPN ones aren't that great because they're all presentation and very little substance, but in the case, it's cool to have ESPN National Hockey Night. It's also a really lame cover, I'll be honest with you. As much as I love all the logos, especially in the 90s, it's just not a whole lot of effort put into that cover, it feels like. And then the last one for the Genesis is another, like Ball Blazers, futuristic combat sport, Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe, which I found out is sort of like a game that started the original Speedball on, your early computers and stuff. And like a lot of games from that sort of console, it got ported by a third-party company. This case it was Arena. But EA used to do that all the time when you see games like Starflight and Might and Magic. Same idea, but not by EA. Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe. my kind of game, basically. And then we got a couple original Xbox games here, and then some Xbox 360 games. First one is Carve, which I know you can't see because this is from a time where EB Games decided to load up every game in their inventory with a million stickers. I like Splashdown, and I like Wave Race and stuff. The reason that I found it worth it to pick up Carve is because it interested me by being made by Argonaut. Argonaut you might know from making, helping to make Star Fox, the original, and Croc, to name a few games. And they always kind of had this really good grasp of like 3D concepts for games at a time when 3D wasn't yet the standard, which is why they made Star Fox. And then I'm always interested in their work because of the whole thing where they got kind of screwed out of making a Yoshi game and then made Croc. So yeah, I picked up Carve just mostly because it has their name on it, but it also seems like it has potential to be a lot of fun too. There's another one, Gladiator Sword of Vengeance, which there's a lot of these type of games from that period as well, right after Gladiator came out basically, and this one's by Acclaim, so this might have been one of the last couple games that Acclaim put out, for all I know. It was in 2003. So yeah, another interesting looking game. You know, I'm all down for this sort of like Sword and Shield, Gladiator, stuff like that, because I love Gladiator. Everyone seemed to love Gladiator at the time. It only makes sense that they make a bunch of those games. And then another game that you might think is weird, I think it's funny, I get Carve and this game, but Wakeboarding Unleashed is probably the least popular of the games that use the Tony Hawk engine. From the time where Activision saw how successful the Tony Hawk games were and decided to make a licensed game with a celebrity from that sport for every extreme sport. You have Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer, you have Sean Palmer's Pro Snowboarding, and Matt Hoffman for the BMX ones, which competed with Dave Mirra. And this one you might not know about because nobody really cares about wakeboarding, it seems. Wakeboarding Unleashed, but it's actually really good because it probably feels the most like a real Tony Hawk game, just you're always being towed behind the boat. So it's a really, really interesting game that exists. And then I got a couple 360 games here. This one, I picked up on a recommendation from Honest Gamer Mike, actually. I had mentioned that Bethesda never makes the kind of games that I'm interested in, and when they're not the games that they're known for, they're never very good. But this was published by them, and I actually made a case from the cover project, and I keep forgetting to bring it home from work where I printed it. So I will have a case for this soon, but right now I just have the disc. This is Wet. It's just a weird name. And then there's a game that I didn't know it existed, and I picked it up the day that I found out it was a thing. I have Sherlock Holmes. I looked for a long time for Sherlock Holmes for the PS4, Crimes and Punishment. And the Adventure Company and Frogwares basically does a pretty good job of making this game on consoles. Which this one in particular is Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper. So I knew that there were a couple of Sherlock Holmes games. I did not know that this one existed. And I grabbed it as soon as I picked it up because it's my kind of game. Love Sherlock Holmes. I love Jack the Ripper. Sort of stuff like that. It's very, very cool. Another game. Actually, you know what? Let's do all these at the same time. Yeah, fuck it, yeah. All these games here are in the 1001 Games to Play Before You Die book. Starting with this one, I wanted this game anyway because I heard a lot of good things about it. So this is Chronicles of Riddick Assault on Dark Athena, and the thing about this is it also includes on disc a remake of the original Chronicles of Riddick game for the Xbox, which is Escape from Butcher Bay. Both games are supposed to be fantastic, cult classics, really, really good games, and I think both of them are in the book individually, but at least one of them is, and I definitely wanted this game anyway. This is Gears of War 2, so I made sure I got a copy with the slipcase and everything like that. And I think the one that's in the book is Gears of War 1, if not 1 and 2. So to save on shelf space, I also grabbed discs, because we have a million discs of this, for 1 and 3. That I put in the case with it. So I put basically the game with the nicest case, because it has a slipcover. And then, because I tried to play Gears of War 2 before, and I couldn't really get into it, but I would give it another try based on the huge support it has from mainstream and, journalistic game media and stuff like that. So, this one is unexpected for sure. I remember when I was a kid, I played Jet Li's Rise to Honor a little bit, which is based on sort of the same thing. So I assume this would be the same thing, and it's absolutely not. I went and did some research on it when I found out, because it is in the 2001 Games to Play Before You Die book. And I was like, well, I have to take a look at that. And it is fucking off the walls insane. Just crazy. It's basically Max Payne, which my problem with Max Payne 1 and 2 has always been that people give them a lot of credit for having great stories. This is Max Payne I'm talking about. But I, as an English graduate, English major, always looked at that. I was like, are you serious? This is what people think is good storytelling? This is so cheesy. This is a game that does the same thing, the same gunplay, the same setting, the same kind of characters, and knows not to take itself seriously, and I gave it huge credit for that, as well as the fact that it's off the walls insane, gunplay, and everything like that. It takes Max Payne and does it with the tone that I think is more fitting for it. So I'm very excited to actually play that in full. Prototype, another game I probably wouldn't have looked twice at if it wasn't in that book. But considering, the kind of things you get to do in it with all the shape-shifting and all that, I could see why it's interesting and why it's worth playing. So there's another one there. Rockstar Table Tennis, another game in the 2001 Games to Play Before You Die book. I had this when I was a kid on the Wii, and I didn't understand what was so good about it. And I'm like, yeah, because you didn't play it on 360, where people went into it the way it was designed to be played, and not with motion controls. And you really should give it a try. So there's also a lot of tennis games in that book, and table tennis is the one I was interested in. But there's Top Spin and Virtua Tennis 3, and I'm like, who the hell's picking all these tennis games? But this one, I knew when it came out. I remember seeing all the hype about that. Here's a couple more games. There's Dead Space 3, like I mentioned. It's cheaper on 360 when you find it, I guess. So, Dead Space 3 on 360, Dead Space 2 on PS3. I had played the first one before. This is a game I probably bought 3 times now, and it is dirt cheap. It's not even really that good, but it's an interesting concept. It's all Pro Football 2K8, and it has, all Hall of Famers and legends and stuff like that. And you do fantasy drafts. You have all the typical game modes you'd find in 2K sports games from the time anyway, but because there's no NFL license, because Madden has that, they have to make do with whatever else they can get. The reason that I still think it's interesting, not only because I have it because it's dirt cheap, but I still think it's interesting to see because it's made by Visual Concepts, the guys that made all of the sports games, that makes me think that Sega should have been able to do things on their own, but nobody gave them credit for it. Sega had employed Visual Concepts through the mid-90s on the Genesis through to the Dreamcast, and even EA had used Visual Concepts. So anytime I see their name, I kind of give it a little bit more credit, and I want to see what they did with it. And I've seen what they did with it, but, and then the last one, this is also a printed case, but it was $1 at GameStop, because I still go into GameStop and check these dollar games and stuff. Clive Barker's Jericho, which is probably not that great, but it's an interesting looking horror game, and it was $1. And I printed this case, and it's on my shelf, and I might never play it. And that is the holy fucking shit amount of games that I bought this month. So, yeah. You want to hope that you get this many games all the time, but it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So, maybe I'll have this many games next month, maybe I won't. But that was what I got this month, and yeah, I'm already busy enough with all the shit I already had, and this is what I do. So, thanks for watching. Listen to me ramble on and lose my voice because I haven't stopped talking. And I will be doing an N64 episode this afternoon as well, so stick around for that on Twitch and then over here. And, thank you. Keep watching. Check the website, cultureshocked.com, for all my articles and shit. And thank you very much.